What's up guys? What's up cycling fanatics? In one of my most recent videos I did a 20-minute power test, my FTP test, and I smashed my personal best. I figured I'm gonna analyze this test on this video and give you my 5 best tips to maximize your test results in your next test. I'll talk about the food, your gear, pacing, and the course selection of your actual test. So make sure to check it out. Okay, so before I start this video, I want to say that everything that I explain in this video and everything that I share in this video is from my own experience. If you have an idea that what I say is wrong or you have more tips, please comment here in the comment section down below this video so everybody can learn from your experience and from your expertise. If you think I'm wrong, you can tell me. That's okay. I won't feel bad about it. I'm just saying this is what I think. It's my opinion, and this is what I've learned over the past couple of years doing multiple tests and getting pretty good results in these tests. So do with it what you want, but I think you can improve on a couple things probably with my information. Here we go, watching the video of my test. This is where I start my test. So I increase the power from the start. And as always in my videos, you'll see the power at the bottom. And then on the left corner, you'll see the RPM, the speed. Just above that, you'll also see power. So why do I display 3 power gauges? Well, it's actually what I also display on my computer. So I've got instant power at the bottom. Then I've got the 3-second power and the 30-second power on the left. You'll notice that there's a difference in how they react. So instant power goes up, and the 3 and the 30-second power will have a little bit of a delay. I use all this information to produce the best possible results. I will talk about this later in the video. At the top left, you'll see the time into the test. Very important, something you really want to have on your display, because you have to know what how long you still have. At the top right, you'll see like sort of a display of the road that I'm riding. And then at the right corner, you'll have the gradient that comes from my Garmin. It's not always super precise, but at least you'll have an idea of how steep it is. Alright guys, let me first have a look into my own test results. Right here in front of me, we've got my power profile in today's plan. That's the program I use. And you'll see the red line here, that's my heart rate. And the green line is the power. And you'll see where it's high, where it's low. And then this part is actually the part where I did the test. So this is my warming up, and then I took a little bit to take off some of my excess clothing because I had a lot of clothing on to warm up, and then I went to the right part of the road and then I started my test. So warm up, some efforts here to really activate those muscles, and then a little bit of recovery, and boom, 20 minutes full gas. Here at the bottom you'll see the Google Maps display. This area where I did it is in Los Angeles. It's called Palos Verdes. It's close to my hotel, and it's a very nice area to ride your bike. There's this little climb, very famous climb. It's called the PV Switchbacks in Strava, which is a nice climb to go up for your test, but it's not long enough. So I had to start all the way down here near to Portuguese Bend. That's how I call it. Passing this golf course, then take a left up to Switchbacks. Actually, at the top of the Switchbacks there was a traffic light, and I had to take another left. So I had to be sort of lucky to have a green light there, and then all the way to crest to the radar domes. And that's what you see here in my power test. So there were a few moments where it didn't go as smooth as it could, but I will talk about this in this coming video. So I can sort of zoom in here on my test, and then we'll see it here. I've got a couple things I can change here. This is this power slide that I can go all the way to the left. This is actually the power that I've done. This is the power that you will see on your display if you display instant power. So it's very jittery, it goes up and down, and that's actually the power that you're pushing out. I try to keep it as steady as possible, but it's very hard. If I move this slider to the right, Now it's sort of averaging 90 seconds. And you'll see that it turns out to be a very, very smooth line. But that's not really what I'm pushing out. If you would be in ergometer mode on your indoor trainer, then this would be something you can do when you're doing like your interval training, whatever. The red line here is my heart rate, by the way, which is obviously starting very low and then rises to pretty high at the end of the test. So let's move this slider to the left a little bit. Let's say around 10 seconds, maybe even less. And you'll see a couple things are interesting. I start off pretty high in power. One thing is to sort of get up to speed. You just push a little bit more. And then another thing is I always push a little bit too hard when I start a test like this. I know this from myself, so I start a test and then after not too long, I will see this and I'm like, okay, slow down. I'm just excited, I want to push full gas, but I need to sort of pace myself. So I go slow down, I start here with like 450, whatever, and then I take it down to 380. And I start pushing. And this is all pretty steady. It goes pretty well. And then right here you see a little peak. What's going on here? Well, if you look here at Google Maps, you can actually see this is where I took a left onto the switchbacks. So this is where I had to time it in between the cars to be at, to turn left without having to stop. So I pushed a little bit harder so I could time it right there in between those cars. And then the rest is all pretty steady. There's some steeper parts in this climb. There's parts with a little bit of tailwind and it's flattening out a little bit. So in general, when it flats out, your cadence goes up and you're pushing a little bit less watts. So as soon as you then shift up to a heavier gear, you can push more again. So you get it back up to where you want. And this is all reversed when it gets steeper. You'll push a little bit more power. You have to shift back. And then, of course, you need to anticipate on this. And the more you do it, the better you know this road, the better it will go, the more steady you can keep your power. But this is also the reason why it goes up and down a little bit. Right here, again, I have this intersection here at the top of the switchbacks. Right here, there's a traffic light. And I had to push pretty hard to go to sneak just in front of that car that was coming up. I did not want to stop my test. I wanted to keep on going. I saw this little gap, so I could go there. It was all safe. Don't worry. And then one big thing is here. I was at the end of the road. This climb is actually a dead end. So at the end of the road, it stops. You need to turn around and go back the same way. I still had 2 minutes left in this test. So I had to turn around. Not ideal. I'll talk about this in the upcoming video, how to sort of avoid this and what's best for your test. So my test is not the best example. So then I had to push downhill on this part and I try to keep it as high as I could. Now if I move this slider up, you'll see that the power that I pushed on the downhill, right here, I turn around and I went downhill on this part. It wasn't that high. My average power might have dropped just a tiny little bit over there on the end. But I feel like it didn't affect my overall test results that much. So I was pretty happy with this test. And like I said, I did a PR, 390 watts. You can see it here. I always press the lap button when I do these tests. So the interval 6 is actually my power test, 20 minutes. And the average was 390 watts. Average heartbeat was 177, maximum heartbeat was 184, which is actually not that high. And I reached my threshold only after like 10 minutes. And after that, I was still pretty steady on heart rate. It didn't go up that much if I compare to previous tests that I've done. My heart rate would shoot up to over 190. So this tells me that I actually had left. And I still did a high power number, so that's very nice. Let's have a look at the actual video and then I'll jump into those 5 tips that I'm gonna give you. Tip number 1. I'm gonna talk about food. What to eat before the test, what to eat during your ride, and what to eat after the test. Of course, the food that you eat after the test is not of effect of the test itself, but it's still very important, so I want to share this with you guys. what I did in this test, even though that I'm intermittent fasting a lot of times, so that means I either start my ride without eating or I don't eat at all during my training and I start eating afterwards, which is a different discussion. In this case, I did eat before this test because research shows that having a carb-loaded body will produce better in high intensity efforts. And also, even to drink a sugary drink and spit it out, so to have the sugar taste in your mouth during high intensity will increase your power. Weird enough, but it's true. So I ate just simple carbs. You can eat white rice, you can eat white pasta, you can eat white bread, you can eat potatoes. Keep it simple. Don't eat too many fibers. Don't eat too many protein. You don't need it in this test. Start eating well before the test. Eat at least 2 to 3 hours before the test. So have your food in your system at least 2 to 3 hours before you start your ride. And right here we look at the video. This is where I turned left onto the switchbacks. I timed it right. And this is where the actual switchback climb begins. It's around 5%. Very nice views here on the right. Okay, little detour, I'm sorry. 2 to 3 hours before you start the test, that's when you eat. And in those 2 to 3 hours before the test, you should not eat a lot. Why? Because the stuff that you just ate needs to be absorbed by your body. Your digestive system is working. And you actually need all the energy and blood to be in your legs and to go to your legs and to your lungs during the test. If you would be eating before the test, then you still have a lot of food coming into your digestive system, and your body is actually going to use energy to digest your food. That's not what you want during the test. So you need the energy to be available for the test and not for your digestion. So that's before the test. During the test, you can drink some energy drink. If you keep some sugars in your system, like in your blood, you will perform slightly better. What I did, I used Martin. Martin is a product that I've been using now for a couple months. It's a very nice product, high carb containment, but not too heavy on the stomach. But you can use any type of energy sports drink, like Gatorade, Cliff Bar, Sis, whatever your preference. Don't use whatever type of drink because your body is using it and he's telling you, oh, this is the best stuff you'll ever have. Take this and you'll rock your FTP test. You're gonna drink this during the test. You've never had it before and it's gonna upset your stomach. Not the best idea. So just do what you've always done. Eat what you've always eaten and train with the stuff that you want to test with. So some kind of energy drink during the test. You don't want to be eating. No eating during this test. No eating just before this test. You don't need it. Do a short 30-minute warm-up and then do the test. You don't need any food during this test. Alright, then after the test, even though it's not of influences of the test itself, it's very important to have some proper food after the test. So most important, especially when you've been riding in warm conditions, will be hydration. So hydrate, carbohydrates, and then protein. After your ride, you want to have simple carbs, simple sugars. So you can eat like wine gums, sugary drinks, juice, recovery shakes. All that stuff is actually within the first hour after your ride. It's not that bad. It's actually very good. The sugar will be absorbed in your body, back into those cells, back into your muscles that you've just depleted completely with this test, if you've done it correctly. So a lot of simple sugars. Then after that first hour, you can eat more complicated sugars like potatoes, rice, bread, pasta, that sort of stuff. And then veggies, of course. And protein is for later. So a little bit afterwards you can eat some protein, but you don't need to be throwing in like a whey protein shake right after this test, because that's not what you need after the test. Some people will feel different. This is what I think is important. Something else you can do after doing a 20-minute test, which is actually very effective and a very good thing to do, is just do some more endurance training. So do like 2 hours of easy, steady endurance. Is actually very effective because you just depleted your glycogen stores in your body, and now you're going to be riding like in zone 2 for 2 hours. Very good training. And then during the ride, you're just going to eat your usual cycling food. And then after the ride, you're going to eat what I've just discussed. Also, stuff that's very good to eat after your ride is like dried fruit. I love like dried dates and mango and apricots and that stuff. I really like to eat those types of things. Tip number 2. The test location. Well, we're watching my video and you can see what kind of location I'm using. In general, this climb is around 5%. I suggest you use a climb that's around 5%. Why? Well, if you use a steeper climb, then it's going to be so steep, you're going to be running out of gears. So you cannot shift light enough unless you're like Chris Froome and you're going up a hill really easy. But in general, you can't shift light enough. Your cadence is going to drop too low, like to 70 or 60 or 50 even. And you're just not able to push that much power. You need a little bit higher cadence to be effective. So don't go too steep. Why do I go on a climb? In general, a climb is a little bit easier to control. Because you're climbing, your speed will be a little bit lower. As you see right now, my speed is always around 20-25 kilometers an hour. If I would go on the flat and push 390 to 400 watts, I would go 45 kilometers an hour. It's just a little bit safer to go a little bit slower. Not the biggest factor why I'm going up a climb, but it's something to consider. In general, a climb doesn't have so many intersections, so that's one thing that's very important. Choose a road that doesn't have a lot of traffic, no intersections, no lights that are gonna force you to stop. If you need to stop during a test, you can go home. There's no need to really keep on going unless you can sort of dodge the lights and keep the power going, then it's okay. So it's best to just avoid those situations. I was not able to avoid it completely in my test, as you will see in this video. I had to sort of go a little bit harder at the traffic lights, and then at the end I had to turn around, which I'm going to show you, but that's why I'm giving you these tips. So try to figure out a climb that's long enough so you can go all the way to the end. A big headwind will also be an option, especially in the Netherlands where it's very flat. There's no climbs, but there's always wind. Try to find a road that's very long into the wind that day. But it's hard to plan because you don't know what the weather is going to be like on the day you want to do your test. So it's a little bit more difficult to plan, but it is possible. So a big headwind or a climb will suit pretty good. And then I go to Strava to see what the KOM is on that climb. In general, I'm not a super fast climber, so if the KOM is 20 minutes, I'm very sure that I'm not going to be ending the climb before 20 minutes. So another thing you want to consider is when you do a climb, either do the same climb every time or start the climb at sea level. Because if you go to another location and you think, oh, I'm going to do my 20-minute test on this climb, and you're in some sort of area which is at 1,000 meters of elevation, you are not going to perform the same way. You don't have the same oxygen pressure, so your power is going to be lower. You are not able to compare those two tests. So if you do another test at a different location, at another climb, make sure you start around sea level every time you do these tests, or at least at the same elevation as you did before. All right, let's jump into tip number 3. Okay, so tip number 3 is about your gear. I'm not talking about the gears as in shifting, but I mean the power meter you're using, because the first thing is you're gonna need a power meter if you want to do a power test. Pretty obvious, huh? But I use a Pioneer power meter. I bought it myself, so I just had the opportunity to buy this power meter, and I've been using it since. It's treating me okay. I had some issues with it, but now I'm doing pretty well. very important in power meters are two things: accuracy and consistency. And the accuracy means, is the power meter showing you the power that you actually are pushing out? So let's say you're pushing 300 watts and your power meter is telling you 320. Then the accuracy is a little bit off. If the next day this power meter is saying 320 again, then at least it is consistent, which is the second measure of power meters. How consistent is your power meter? That's actually very important, because if the next day your power meter would say 310 or 300 or 290, then you're doing apples and oranges. You have no idea what you're talking about. So actually the consistency is way more important than the accuracy. It doesn't really matter what the number is if the number is the same every time you use it. So this is also the reason why you should always use the same power meter for your test. Don't use a different power meter for a different test and then try to compare those, because you're again trying to compare apples and oranges. And also it's not that much of a deal to compare your FTP or your power numbers with your friends, because if they're on a different power meter, maybe yours is reading high and theirs are reading low, or the other way around. And then you think you're super awesome, but when you come to the group ride or to the race, it turns out you're not, or the other way around. So always use the same power meter. That's pretty much the most important. And then another thing of your gear, let's say the bike you're using, make sure you have that range of actual gear so you can shift. So you can shift light enough to have the cadence, which I already talked about in the gradient of the climb. Tip number 4, pacing. We're gonna talk about pacing. Pretty much it's very important in pacing is that you don't go too hard and you don't go too slow. Easy as that. Well, it's actually not that easy. It requires a lot of practice, and practice makes perfect. So there's pretty much 4 options how to pace your climb. There's the steady, in my opinion, the most ideal way to pace it, which is the same power over the whole segment. And then there is the negative split, starting a little bit lower and then increasing as you go. You've got the smiley face, starting high, going a little less, and then ending very strong. And then you have the sad face, which is the other way around. There's also the overconfident pacing, which is, it can happen when you either think you are stronger than you are, or you have a bad day, or your power meter is reading low that day and you're pushing out actually more than you think, and you just burn yourself up before the end of the test. So a couple ways of pacing your test. I will talk about it a little bit. How do I pace my climb? I've got a couple different readings on my cycling computer. We start with instant power, and when I go to my analysis of my test, and I go slide this bar all the way to the left, you'll see instant power, and it's jumping up and down a little bit. It's very hard to read what you're actually doing. So that's why I always have 3-second power and 30-second power as well on the display, so you have a little bit more of an idea what the average is, what you're actually doing. And don't go off the instant and the 3-second power too much, because the moment you look, it might be up and then you're adjusting, but you're over adjusting and it will go up and down way too much. So go a little bit on feel and use those power references together. Looking at my video, you'll see that I have 3-second power, 30-second power, and these are the things that I'm using. In this part of the ride, I'm in 16 minutes into the test. I felt very strong, and right now I'm pushing 400 watts, 30-second average. So I'm actually pushing a little bit more than my overall, but that's because I was approaching the end of the test and I was still feeling very well. All the stuff that I have on my display are the cadence and my heart rate, and of course time. Time is pretty important. You want to know how long you have left. Cadence is just something that I want to know. I go on self-selected cadence, and in general I'm around 95 to 100. Right now sometimes I'm even on 105 RPM. And then I look at my display, I'm like, oh yeah, that's correct, that feels right. And so I just like to see those numbers. Heart rate is a reference that I use to sort of judge how well I'm doing during the test and if I have left or not. Some people don't like to look at heart rate at all. I do like to keep it with me. In this particular test, I started off a little bit high right here. I dropped it down, and after about 5 minutes I had 390 on average, which was higher than I expected, and I was still feeling pretty well. My heart rate wasn't that high. After 10 minutes my heart rate was still sort of below or around my anaerobic threshold, so I really knew that I was doing very well in this test and I could actually go a little bit faster. So I do use heart rate as a measure, and I take it into account. In previous tests I know that my heart rate was higher. Like I ended well over 190, and in this test I was still around 183, 184, and I was pretty steady at the end. It wasn't increasing the whole time. So this tells me I still had a little bit left actually, so I could have pushed a little bit harder. Something that I will take with me for the next test. Speed is not important at all in this case, so you don't have to display it on your computer because it says nothing. In terms of cadence and pacing, I would suggest really use your own cadence. There's no need to push a high cadence because somebody tells you it's better, or use 110 RPM because the pros use 110 RPM. Just use the cadence that you like, and that's what you're gonna perform the best at. Okay, so right now we're looking at this video and I'm 18 minutes into the test. I still have 2 minutes left and I got to the end of the climb, so I had to turn around and go downhill as fast as I could because I was feeling so good. I wanted to finish this test, so I really wanted to finish those 20 minutes because I needed that 20-minute effort. So I decided just to try to push as hard as I could on the downhill. I had to brake a little bit to not go too fast and not spin out, and it's not ideal. I had a little moment of not pedaling and I had a little drop in power. I couldn't push as hard as I wanted on the downhill, but at the end I don't think it had sort of affected my average power in too much of a negative way. The last part of this climb is not too steep, luckily, so I could still sort of keep pedaling on the downhill. And then I pushed a little bit. I really pushed hard at the end, but I think I could have performed a little bit better. Especially the last couple minutes I could have pushed a little harder, but then I was going down, which makes it sort of impossible to really push hard. So I had a little bit left in this test, and that takes me to tip number 5, which is very easy: practice. Practice, practice, practice. Practice makes perfect. So the more you do these kinds of tests, the better you will get at them, so the better you will perform. So even though you do 2 consecutive tests, you're probably going to perform better on the second one, even though you're not stronger on the second one. So the more tests you do, the better you'll get, just because you're better at doing tests. But what I do is I look at the previous test in the program that I just showed you, and I sort of analyze it, and I try to take some stuff that went wrong, or the stuff that I can do better, and take it to the next test. So in this case I would go on a different climb which is long enough and doesn't have two intersections, so would make it a little bit easier for me. There's a couple things I can say about doing a test and getting the best results, what you need to practice and where your experience comes into play. And that's, like I said, analyze and improve. Get your mindset just before you're gonna do this test. Be ready to feel pain, because it's gonna be hard. You're gonna be in pain, and you need to suffer. If you're not suffering, you're not pushing all out. So that's really important in this test, and push it to your limit. A big thing, a big measure of this test is how well can you push yourself. If you're able to really push yourself to the limit, you're gonna have a high result. If you feel a little bit of pain, you're like, oh, my legs start to feel, my legs start to hurt, and I don't want to have pain. I'm not gonna push so hard. Then you're not gonna have your maximum power average. So maybe you need to go to your group ride, your local group ride that has a big climb. You're not the fastest one on the group, but in this climb you're gonna do your 20-minute test and you're gonna go all out on this climb. And you have a couple other guys that are right there. You can sort of aim, and they're gonna help you push the maximum. Maybe you have one buddy who is faster than you, and you're gonna ask him to half wheel you the whole time in this test. So he's gonna be your motivation to push a little bit harder. Maybe you're gonna put up some music and just go full gas because the music's so good and it helps you. Whatever you do, it never gets easier. You're just gonna go harder. Remember that. So guys, these were my five tips to help you get a better result in your next FTP test. Let me know if this was helpful. Also give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'm gonna see you next time. See ya!